Hey, what's up? We're going to be doing some tutorials today about on soldering based on a bunch of people asking about it. So here we go. We have our soldering iron here. We have two wires that we're going to solder together, and we have some solder right here, or solder if you're in England. One of the main things to be conscious of when you're soldering is that you're at the right temperature of your iron, and that you don't spend too much time with the heat on your components that you're soldering. And the reason for that is a lot of, especially modern components, are very, very tiny, and you can damage them with a lot of heat. So right now, my soldering iron is set to about 310 degrees Celsius. That's about 600 degrees Fahrenheit. For regular solder, that's about what you want to use. However, there is some high temperature solder that requires higher temperatures, obviously. Second of all, or next, I mean, is that inside this solder, it's kind of a low temperature melting alloy. There's actually rosin inside. There's a thin core of rosin, and what the rosin does is melt as you apply heat, and it will allow the solder to spread more evenly, and it cleans your solder joint. So what you don't want to do is, and what some people will try and do, is heat some solder onto your iron and then drag a big blob of solder onto the things that you're trying to solder. That's not what you want to do, because the rosin by that point begins to evaporate, and then you'll get kind of a shitty solder joint. So instead, what I think to keep in mind is that solder will flow to whatever is hot. So I have two wires here. I'm going to bring them together, kind of loosely tie them, do the best I can here. So I'm sure you can do better at home, but for today this will work. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the tip of my iron clean, and then I'm going to heat up the two things I'm soldering, and then start to melt solder on there, and just like that I'm done. So not too tough. Just a quick note, I wanted to say, when cleaning your iron, I'm using this sort of steel wool type of material. I think it's made of brass or something. You'll see some products that are a sponge, and the idea is you'll wet the sponge and clean the tip of your iron. And that's really not advisable, because if you put something that's 600 degrees Fahrenheit on a wet sponge, you're going to actually do more damage to the tip of your iron than not. So we use this here at the shop. We don't get it wet or anything like that. We just kind of drag the tip across it, and we get a nice, clean, ready to solder soldering iron.
Yeah.